The next change was his most daring, his most brilliant, his most famous. Christian Gerhardt's decided to become a Rockefeller. Not just any Rockefeller. He chose the name Clark Rockefeller, a name that sounded real, a name that showed old money and immense power. He moved to New York City, the perfect stage for his grandest performance. He completely changed who he was. He dropped the British accent. He acted like a quiet, strange member of America's most famous rich family. He was no longer a charming socialite. He was a quiet, smart mystery, the kind of man who didn't need to impress anyone. He claimed he was a physicist, a mathematician, a man who worked on secret government projects. He said he was a freelance central banker. He spoke many languages. He collected modern art. His stories were vague but impressive. He never talked much about his family. He would say things like, "We don't talk about the other Rockefellers." This only made him seem more mysterious. It made his claims seem more real. Why would a real Rockefeller need to brag? His quiet confidence was his greatest weapon. He understood that with a name like Rockefeller, less was more. The name itself did all the work. He built his new life with great care. He joined fancy clubs, the Lotto's Club, the Knickerbocker Club. He used his supposed name to open doors that had been closed to him before. He created an air of being very smart. He would have long, rambling talks about theoretical physics and international money matters. Most people didn't understand what he was talking about, but they were too scared to question a Rockefeller. He took advantage of what they assumed, their feelings of not being good enough. He knew that people are often too polite, or too afraid of looking foolish, to challenge someone who seems powerful. His entire life was a carefully built lie. He had no fortune, he had no family connections, he was not a physicist, he was a complete fake. But his performance was so convincing that he fooled everyone. He fooled friends, he fooled business partners, he even fooled a brilliant, Harvard-educated woman into marrying him. He had reached the top of his trickery career. He was living a life that the boy from Bergen, Germany could only have dreamed of. He was Clark Rockefeller, a man of immense wealth and importance, and it was all built on a foundation of lies. As Clark Rockefeller, he married a woman named Sandra Boss. She was incredibly smart, a graduate of Stanford and Harvard Business School, a high-earning partner at the important consulting firm McKinsey & Company. She was honestly the perfect partner for his scam. She had the money. He had the name. Together, they made a powerful couple. They lived in a world of privilege. They bought a beautiful apartment on Beacon Hill in Boston. They owned a country estate in New Hampshire. They moved in the highest circles of society. No one suspected that the man Sandra Boss had married was a fake. Their life together was strange. Clark was controlling. He managed all their money. Sandra's entire salary went into accounts that he alone controlled. He kept her away from her friends and family. He was paranoid. He insisted on using payphones. He refused to have a driver's license or a social security number. He explained these odd behaviors as the quirks of the super rich. He said he was protecting their privacy, protecting them from the dangers that came with the Rockefeller name. Sandra, a brilliant woman, believed him. She was caught in his web of lies. She was living with a complete stranger. They had a daughter. They named her Ray, but Clark called her Snooks. He loved her very much. He was, by all accounts, a loving father, but his paranoia and control only grew. He homeschooled the child. He limited her contact with the outside world. He was creating a bubble for his family, a bubble that he could control completely, a bubble where his lies could not be seen through. He was living the life he had always wanted. He had a famous name, a wealthy wife, and a beautiful daughter. He was the king of his own small, made-up kingdom. But for all his careful planning, he could not control everything. His marriage to Sandra began to fall apart. His behavior became more and more strange. His lies became harder to keep up. Sandra grew tired of his controlling nature. She grew tired of being isolated. She started asking questions. She hired a private investigator. She wanted a divorce. For Clark Rockefeller, this was a disaster. A divorce meant a close look at his life. It meant lawyers and financial records. It meant his carefully built world was about to come crashing down around him. The end was near. The divorce process was the beginning of the end for Clark Rockefeller. Sandra Boss's lawyers began digging into his past. They needed financial records. They needed proof of who he was. Clark could provide neither. He had no birth certificate, no passport, no social security number. He had no real past. He gave them excuse after excuse. He claimed his records were lost or sealed. He tried to use his name to scare them. But the legal system was not like a fancy party. It demanded proof. And Clark Rockefeller had none. Sandra herself started to see the flaws in his act. She realized how little she actually knew about her own husband. He had always been secretive about his past. He claimed he was an orphan. He said his parents had died in a car crash, but the stories were always vague. They changed over time. She began to suspect that everything he had ever told her was a lie. The man she had loved, the man she had married, the father of her child, was a complete mystery. The fear and confusion must have been overwhelming. Who was this man living in her house? The private investigator Sandra hired started to find things that didn't match up. He couldn't find any record of a Clark Rockefeller with the background her husband claimed. The real Rockefeller family had no idea who he was. The name was a ghost. The entire identity was made up. As more and more evidence piled up, Sandra's lawyers became more aggressive. They demanded a full account of his life. They wanted to know where he came from. They wanted to know who he really was. The pressure was building. The man who had lived a life of lies for 30 years was finally being trapped. He tried to fight back. He hired his own lawyers. He continued to insist he was a Rockefeller. He threatened to use his family's power to crush them. But it was all a bluff. He had no power. He had no influence. He was an empty suit. The divorce was finalized. Sandra won full custody of their daughter Ray. Clark was allowed supervised visits, but for a man who had built his entire world around control, this was unacceptable. He had lost his wife. He had lost his money. Now he was losing his daughter. He was desperate, and a desperate man is a dangerous man.